Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another broadcast of The Weekly with me, Neff. Please subscribe to the channel, share this video with some family members, friends, and colleagues. I definitely appreciate the support. Let's talk a little bit about weapons. This is going to be a quick review of the film, definitely trying to make it spoiler-free here. And so, watched the film last night, getting to the review now. Overall, the film wasn't that bad. Really didn't meet the expectations that I had for it, to be quite honest, but that doesn't make it a bad film. There's a couple things that I liked, a couple things that I didn't like about the film. Let's talk about the things that I did like. I thought the atmosphere was really good. It definitely makes you feel like you're in the town of Maybrook. This is where this film takes place, right? It's encompassing in that way. Not so immersive because obviously you know it's a film, right? It doesn't feel like you're in the film itself, but you understand the atmosphere. It cuts through very well. I think the cinematography is really maybe my favorite part of the film overall when it comes to the pillars of film. The tone is decent as well. I thought the acting was good enough, and this is a film that had some production issues only because of the strike, right? A lot of this film was being conceived in 2023, 2024, and to be honest, you had a whole list of other actors that were going to be a part of this film. Most of them were replaced, and I think it's an upgrade overall. So you have Julia Garner in this film, right? She's starring. You have Josh Brolin co-starring. You have Benedict Wong in this film as well, and then a bunch of great support. This film was what we thought it would be as far as the perspectives. We knew this film was going to be broken down into about 6 perspectives, and they did follow through with that. Now, the reason they had 6 is something else I'll go into a little later if I do have time for it, but you got to be paying attention to these things. There's a lot of different tidbits in there that I think went over people's heads. One, this film was marketed with weapons in red, all caps, and then when you see the introduction to the film, it's blue and you have the triangle in the middle. Now, if you know anything about the Freemasons, then you're kind of understanding what I'm going there with that. So that was something very interesting to pay attention to. The York Rite, the Scottish Rite, the Red Lodge, the Blue Lodge, as well as a lot of the triangular references throughout the film. And so think about it. When you have a triangle, you have 3 points, okay? The bell that Aunt Gladys has 3 points in the middle to resemble a triangle with the 6 right in the middle of that bell. Then when the people actually become, I guess you could say, possessed, they're running a certain way. It's not for a stylistic approach. It's the shape of a triangle. And to open things up a bit more for you, if you look at your dollar, the all-seeing eye is inside of a triangle. And so just some things to reference for people that didn't really understand that right there, but don't want to get too deep in the woods on that. If you know, you definitely know. But yeah, I thought those were good aspects of the film. I thought the writing was lackluster, to be quite honest. There were 2 characters within the film that I thought's perspectives were plot devices altogether. I feel like if you remove those characters from the film, as far as them getting as much screen time as they got, I don't think it would have changed the film at all. And so I thought that could have been cut from the film and made it at least 20 minutes shorter, which I think would have made the film a lot tighter and a lot better. I do like the end of the film, although there was some funny comedic elements to it. Zach Cregger does come from comedy, right? I did think it had a seriousness to it, but with both those elements being blended well, I do think it was a satisfying end to wrap up the film with a nice tight bow. Now, when I'm comparing it to a recent horror film that I just watched called Together, I think Together was a film that was basically on pace with this film, Weapons, and that was from Neon Pictures, starring Dave Franco and Allison Brie, right? All the way up until the end of the film, I feel like Together kind of got screwed up towards the end of the film. I want to say the last 15 minutes of the film. And so this film, it's streamlined in the 3rd act, right? With Zach Cregger, I think he has a lot of very interesting editing choices. And from what I can see, Joe Murphy is the guy editing this film. And so Joe Murphy utilizes some interesting editing choices in this film. And I think some of those editing choices really pulled the film back in the 1st and 2nd act, even though there's 6 perspectives, right? You could say pretty much 2 perspectives per act, right? And I think towards the end of the film, that's where everything came together very well. And you get to a nice climax and conclusion all at the end of the film, which is what the audience is craving, because as you're watching the film, during these perspectives, there's a lot of moments where there's a build up, and then a cut into a scene that has nothing to do with the scene that happened prior. Everything gets intertwined towards the end, and it all makes sense, right? It's interweaved pretty well, I have to say that. Even though, like I said, the writing's not the best, he figured out a way to tie everything in, right? And so he did that well, but like I said, a lot of buildup with these perspectives, and then you get a cut into something else and it starts all over. And so that can really throw off the timing, to be honest. To tie into that topic a little more, I'd say this film really is a slow burn. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour, I'd say, to get things going. And it could even be longer than that, to be quite honest. I can see a lot of people just tuning out of this film. There are some scenes that get you going, but like I said, with these weird editing choices, you get momentum and then it gets stopped right in the middle and then you go into a new perspective. I do like how he does have multiple perspectives. It is creative. I know they said he referenced Magnolia a lot, and I think he pulls off the different perspectives well. Not only are you seeing these perspectives all at the same time, but you're understanding why these people are doing what they're doing, their mindset, and how it really comes together towards the end of the film. Overall, I'd say character development is pretty much non-essential in this film. It is a horror film. As you know, these films don't have too much depth to them. They did just enough of what they needed to do to let you understand who these characters are, and it makes sense for this film, but don't expect too much depthy character development here. I believe this movie was marketed pretty well. I only watched one trailer, and I think it was that teaser trailer that released for the film. I did look at some of the promotions that they had, like the MaybrookMissing.net website. I really did like that, and also the unlisted footage that was posted where you see Aunt Gladys in the background of the screen and the kids running. I thought that was very eerie and interesting. I like how they promoted this film, and obviously they did well. It was a packed house at the theater, and I think for the most part, people did enjoy the film. But to me, the film didn't live up to the hype that I expected, and I think that's what we're getting with horror films nowadays, right? Expect these films to be solid 6.5s and 7s. They're not really going to get above that unless they're really tapping into another metric of cinema. I do think Zach Cregger took some chances with this film. He's definitely expanding as a director. I think this film is shot very uniquely. I do like it, but I found his work with Barbarian a little more enjoyable than this film overall. One, not so many perspectives, even though he did the perspective game in that film, if you remember, right? You have the young lady's perspective, right? Bill Skarsgård is there as well. And then you have the perspective of the character that actually owns the house in Michigan, right? And then you have the perspective of the villain, the main villain of the film. And so you have three perspectives there in Barbarian. So he kind of did the same thing there. He just expanded on that. But yeah, Barbarian seemed to be more streamlined, linear, and to the point. The main issue that I had with Barbarian overall was that odd cut in the second act, into which it seems like a whole different film restarts over. But other than that, Barbarian was an interesting film that actually made me think a lot more after. This film makes me think a little bit more about it, but I don't think about it in a positive light. The more I think about the film, the more I break it down and start to see things that are wrong with the film. And a lot of, I guess, imagery and messaging throughout the film that seem a little darker than it needs to be. But these are things that I picked up on. I don't know if everybody just looked at this and said, oh, it's just entertainment. But like I said, people need to do a little more research on some of the stuff that they're watching in theaters and on TV, because a lot of the signs are there. And I believe Zach Cregger's friend died in some weird, mysterious way as well, which I think is very eerie. I guess he fell off a balcony, and anytime anybody just falls off of a balcony and then they chalk it up to intoxication, it just seems a little odd and convenient, but that is beside the point. Overall, ladies and gents, I'm going to give this movie a 7 flat. It was sitting at about a 6.5, 6.7 until the end. I thought the end ended satisfyingly. Like I said, the film does have its issues. It's not a perfect film. I think if this thing is getting over at 8 or 9, I think it's a little overhyped from people that are seeing it from that perspective. This film wasn't scary whatsoever. To me, more of a suspense film than anything. It had some horror elements, but there was no jump scares to me. When I was in the theater, I heard a lot more people laughing rather than gasping or shrieking in their seats. And so, yeah, this film definitely checks more boxes in the suspense thriller genre than it does in the horror genre to me overall. And so, like I said, my score is a 7 out of 10. It barely got that 7 out of 10. I want to know your scores down in the comments. Let me know what you thought about this review. Like I said, I tried to skirt through spoilers. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. And I'd say this film deals with a lot of implying things, right? You just have to try to figure out things as you're watching it. The film doesn't tell you much. A lot of things are implied throughout the film, which I thought was a negative thing as well. But anyway, I'd barely recommend this movie in theaters, but if you are going to go take a chance on it in theaters, I think you need to watch it on the biggest screen possible. That is the best way to see it, just to enjoy it as much as you can. But if you decide to stream it at home, I don't think that's a bad choice as well, especially if you have a nice sized TV and great surround to go along with it. Another thing before I get out of here, the score. I feel like the score was way more present in the beginning of the film. It was omnipresent throughout the film, but I think it started to fade towards the end. I really did like the presence of the score in the beginning of the film. It was right there, really encapsulating the atmosphere. Like I said, that's why I think in the beginning of the film, the atmosphere was heavy with building that tension, letting you know where you're at in the situation you're in, but not enough things in between to carry through properly to get you to the end of that second, to the beginning of the third act, to where I think the film really came together well. And so just some things to take note of before you do go watch this film, if you so choose to do so. Anyway, like I said, please let me know what you thought about the film. If you saw it, I want to hear some comments. Some people have already commented on saying they're going to go see the film and they've left some scores, and I appreciate that feedback. Like this video, share this video with some family members, friends, and colleagues. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't and ring the bell for notifications. Hope you enjoyed this review for Weapons. Be safe. It's Neff signing off.